All right. Welcome back to the Mind Body Mushroom, the podcast where we explore the holistic health, personal growth, and the mindset shifts that drive high performance. I'm your host, Jordan Ryan, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Wind and Sea Coffee, the world's best tasting adaptogenic coffee, crafted to fuel both body and mind. Today, we're diving into a conversation that's as important as it is overdue: mental health for first responders. Now, we talk a lot about alternative health for military and veterans, but first responders face a unique set of challenges, often dealing with the high stress environments daily without the same support systems. Our guest, Matt Domyancic, has walked the path himself. A former SWAT officer, police academy instructor, and strength coach for elite athletes, Matt knows firsthand the physical and mental toll that comes with a life on the front lines. After medically retiring from law enforcement, he shifted his focus to advocacy, chaplaincy, and holistic wellness, dedicating his life to supporting active police officers through peer support, mental health programs, and a modern approach to spirituality. Matt has worked with agencies across the country, helping first responders integrate strength training, stress management, and proactive mental health care into their lives. Because the tactical performance isn't just about physical endurance, it's also about resilience in all aspects. Today, we're going to deep dive into his journey and the realities of policing and what needs to change to truly support those who serve. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was a great intro, man. We didn't even talk for over a year, and
Well,
great
you know what?
summary.
It makes it easier when we have a guest that has a lot of like publicly available, information. And I mean, you're a busy man, dude. Um, you were just mentioning actually right before we got on that you've been super busy. You want to tell us what you've been working on for like the past, since I guess we met, which I'll introduce how we met. But what have you been working on?
So I used to do more when I lived in LA, was at police and fire stations every day, riding along, lifting weights, shooting guns, going to training, also taking them on retreats, shooting with veterans that are transitioning out of the military. So I was more like in the trenches. And each of those types of daily visits also would generate text phone calls to get together off duty. And that's go for a walk on the beach, lift weights, do jujitsu, but often share their story or go to a wellness center and do cold plunge, sauna, float tank, breath work, go get an organic meal and allow people to just kind of get things off their chest, share their story, and normalize better self care, holistic wellness. And yeah, man, you're going to see a lot of suffering as a first responder or a combat veteran. A lot of people already have adverse childhood experiences. High performance people in general, including athletes that are now in corporate America, it's like gas pedal, gas pedal, gas pedal, suck it up, drive on. And when tough things get tough, grind more, get up, work out more, more coffee, more chew, like work harder.
Yeah.
And it ends up draining the battery. We know that men in general and alpha male types end up with PTSD, divorce, addiction, suicidal issues. And yet, most of our resources are reactive only to PTSD, addiction, suicide. They come after the bomb is blown up in your life. Second divorce, you're now addicted, you're out of shape, you're in a dark hole, getting medically retired or got a DUI, whatever it is. And then somebody that's not culturally competent or trauma informed offers you help. Or even if you seek help, they don't understand the veteran, the cop, the firefighter. And even when people are seeking therapy, meditation, yoga, journaling, like guys and gals from these professions will get curious, but the resources for those things like turn them off.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Totally. That's funny. You're kind of jogging my memory of some stuff that we talked about. So real quick little rewind. We met at a surf therapy kind of, I guess it was like a competition sort of, but there's a lot of these surf therapy groups. One More Wave, the Swell Mission, Pendleton Surf Club, and their mission is kind of, providing some holistic health support for guys in these professions and gals um, uh, through surf therapy. And that was one thing that, so that was a little bit how we met. But what I remember you talking about that was super interesting was even if you get a guy that's on board with these type of like, yeah, man, I need help. I don't want to just, take some pills or whatever the case is, or just suck it up. And so then you go to these like therapy or whatever it is that your command may offer you. It's not run by your peers. It's run by, like a soft, kind of squishy, like, psychology or some like an academic. And so there's already this cultural barrier that, it creates a barrier for them to access those resources in the first place. You want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, I think if you're a jock, a cop, a vet, a firefighter, you want people to be able to, you want to be seen, heard, understood, not judged, not have people psychopathologize you, and not give you unsolicited bullshit advice on how to fix you before they've even heard your story. And so this is the world of influencers. This is also the world of mental health and wellness for first responders and veterans, is that it could be some former special ops dude or somebody that worked with them, that 2 or 3 years ago, they started their healing journey and they did EMDR or ketamine or ayahuasca or SGB or this type of yoga or this type of meditation. And now they're the guru and they're telling you that the solution to your problem is CrossFit or jujitsu or carnivore or vegan or fill in the blank with this type of thing. I have the therapy that will save you or cure you. I have the retreat or the medicine or this protocol, or hang out with me and my friends and pay me. And sometimes it's the former operators and cops and firefighters themselves, or it's the clinician or the clergy or the coach. Like, how many coaches these days are people that, God bless you for being on your healing journey and your growing journey, but that's a lifetime. And if you have zero training in psychology and theology and spirituality and kinesiology and functional and integrative medicine, and you've just started your journey, like, pump the brakes on going out and fixing everyone else, especially if you're not a good listener. And so, like, the people that are hurting often are desperate for relief. So they may listen to the charismatic guru if they're in that broken of a place. But I know that there's a big void for high functioning alphas that even if they're hurting, they're still high functioning and they don't fall for the charlatans or the quick fixes, but nobody's speaking to them in a manner that it resonates. So, I mean, I don't stay in shape to try to forward my message. I've been working out since sixth grade and been a jock and a strength coach and a SWAT guy. But that's part of what people first start talking to me about is, oh, you look like you still lift weights.
Yeah.
What protein shake or what diet or how much do you bench? And you know what? That gives me an in. Then an hour or two later, or maybe even a year later, if it's a longer term relationship, we can talk about how's your heart, brother? How are your feelings doing? How's your mental health? How's your thought life? Are you taking care of yourself? Versus and this is other cops and SF guys talking to me. If a middle-aged female that's totally out of shape, that's a clinician, starts talking to them, they're like, dude, this broad doesn't understand me. And I'm not saying broad in a derogatory sense. I'm using the language of the people that are speaking to me. Or in the case of chaplains, I'm a chaplain and I obviously believe faith and spirituality is important. But if the chaplain's an 80-year-old out of shape person that's never done a ride along or wasn't a military chaplain deployed with the troops and then starts telling you how to take care of yourself, there's just a huge disconnect because there's no common ground. Like, there's a sign on my parents' wall that I remember since I was a kid. It's still there. It says, never criticize a man until you walked a mile in his moccasins. So for us, when I say us, high functioning, high achieving, alpha, first responder, veteran, former athlete, corporate America types, like, we want somebody that understands what it's like to pursue excellence and to have had strong bonds where the job or the sport is a huge part of our identity, but not in the worst ways. There's a lot of beautiful things about the brotherhood and about the grind and about achieving success together and understanding that we don't have to see eye to eye, but we got to stand shoulder to shoulder. There's beautiful things about sports, military, law enforcement, fire. But at the same time, on either side of every virtue, there's also a vice. And our cultures have a lot of unhealthy vices that we often deal with to self-medicate, numb, and distract ourselves, often just from our feelings,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know? And
Right.
then we stigmatize, you're a pussy, weak, broken, or a bitch, or I'm crazy
Mm-hmm.
because I'm feeling my feelings. And then people sometimes will start sharing their story and then be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. And it's like, what are you sorry for? This is part of what's going to heal you, to share your story with a brother or sister that's also high functioning, been there, where at one point in their life, maybe driving fast and hard in your profession or your sport was a beautiful thing, but now we're at a different phase of life where it's a detriment to our relationships and our further psychological, emotional, and spiritual growth.
Right. Right. And another part of it is that you had kind of talked about is even if somebody is being proactive about getting help, if they're still active in their role, they don't want to, you know, not just the stigma that is associated with that, but like they literally don't want to, have their gun taken from them. Hey, we're not going to put you, out on these missions because you have now you're the nail that's sticking out, and so now, uh-oh, are you a problem? Do we need to worry about you? So guys are like, just sucking everything up because they want to stay in the fight. They want to keep doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big problem. And if, I mean, look at sports. Like, we don't wait until you blow out your knee or tear your hamstring. Okay, now you can't play and you need a surgery. You're going to be in rehab for 3 to 4 months. It's like, we look ahead in this sport. These are the common injuries. So the strength and conditioning coach is going to address this. The sports medicine staff is going to do prehab on these areas. The sports psychologist and clinical psychologist at your big time D1 school or some of the special ops units, you have resources for all these things to do the preventative and resiliency building before you deploy, before you play in a game, where at least for first responders, it's like zero strength conditioning, sports psychology, nutrition. Go until you blow out your hamstring and then let's address it. It's all reactive only. And if we know that PTSD, addiction, divorce, and suicide is an issue for people that are immersed in the suffering of others, you have a steady diet of toxic and dysfunctional people, on and off adrenaline dumps and exposure to trauma, and often military veterans and first responders are people that come from a lot of adverse childhood experiences for which combat and the stuff you see on the street is unconsciously scratching at your childhood wounds. But we haven't educated you for you to understand that we need to do some self-reflection, pump the brakes, train the parasympathetic nervous system so you can be more in touch with your physiology. We calm our physiology down. We have a safe container in our body. We allow our thoughts and feelings to come up. We don't judge our thoughts and feelings as weak, crazy, or broken, because perhaps police, fire, and military start training people on post-traumatic growth, which is a valid area of psychological research that shares how we can grow from the adversity in our life, just like we grow from running faster or more miles or putting more weight on the bar or doing more reps, or we manipulate variables in our workouts to grow stronger. Well, life gives us shit sandwiches and adversity. Sometimes we cause them ourselves by the mistakes we make, from patterns that we don't recognize from childhood that helped us survive or thrive. But at some point, the patterns that helped us survive and thrive are now the obstacle to further growth. If we were teaching these things younger in the military, first responder professions, or even schools for all human beings, well, then when these things come up, we're doing the strength conditioning, we're doing the sports psychology, and then there's self-awareness of, hey, let me address this and let's not stigmatize the self-care or seeking professional and objective help. Like, are you a moron at your D1 school for listening to a strength coach, the sports psych, or your linebacker coach? Like, no. You go to these people. You go to the whoever's in charge of nutrition if they have a person that's in charge of nutrition. You pay attention to these people. But as a cop or a firefighter or the regular military, as I understand it, we don't have strength coaches, sports psych, sports medicine, sports nutrition like some of the tier one teams may have. and what D1 athletes have. So like athletes prepare 90% of the time and compete maybe 5 or 10% of the time, right? And they know who their opponents are. They get to study their opponents. They know what date they're playing that opponent. Like, man, every day could be your Super Bowl as a cop or a firefighter. And there is no off season. Every day is freaking game day. And we have no strength and conditioning or sports psych or sports nutrition. In fact, the badge of honor goes to the cop or firefighter that works a shit ton of overtime and brags about how many girls they're banging, even though they're married, and everybody high fives each other, how much chew, how many coffees, how many energy drinks. And we somehow like the culture allows that. And I'm not saying to like shame or guilt trip people, but more, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you're doing that, pull somebody to the side, like, bro, what's going on that you got to work so much overtime, drink so many energy drinks? And dude, if you get caught cheating on your wife, it's going to destroy your kids' lives. So even if you should get a divorce, let's think about doing, how can I help you do this in a better manner?
Totally. And one thing that Guy McDermott, who we interviewed a couple weeks ago, former Navy SEAL, I believe a friend of yours, I think you connected us.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that one thing that is kind of unique between, because he was a first responder, he was I believe a firefighter,
In Los Angeles,
in
yep.
Los Angeles after. I mean, so that's a gnarly job. And he was saying that like one major difference that he felt between the military and first response is that there's this like off time kind of like that there's a decompression to an extent. I mean, you're doing something overseas in a completely different context, and then hey, you get some downtime in Germany for a week before your PCS back here, and then you have a little bit. But when you are on the front lines in a first response role, you're constantly in that war zone, and you're also constantly at home. And so it's like it seems like it kind of crosses wires in a way that like being in the military kind of it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin Gilmartin, a book called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. That's probably the best short book by a psychologist that's also a former cop and veteran. He talks about hypervigilance. And by the time a cop gets home, like they're burned out, and the wife's like, what do you want to eat? I don't care. What do you want to do tonight? I don't care. Like it's your gas pedal, your cortisol, your adrenaline. And by the time you get home, you're not connected to your family at all. We don't teach how to do that transition every day, which, like you said in the military, you get a transition because you're in Germany for a week and then you fly home and you're not deployed. So, how do you, and I called it the armor down routine, is even on your, if a 5 to 15 or 50-minute drive home, are you cranking the radio and another chew on a coffee just to get home, or a beer? Like back in the day when I was a cop, people were drinking beer, choir practice after the shift, drinking a beer on the way home. None of this stuff's going to help your heart rate variability, your deep sleep, or your brain health. But what are you doing to transition and take the armor off before you go home? Tap the brakes, activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and change your intentions for I'm entering into, even if I'm a single person. Hey, I'm going home to my normal neighborhood to engage with civilians, and I don't have to be the hard ass cop anymore. And not everything is a threat, and not everyone's an asshole and a liar.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, we don't teach. Hey, most of our lives in general as human beings are unconscious reactions, and we're not teaching people to be aware of, you know, responding versus reacting, pausing, pumping the brakes, taking a breath, calming down our physiology, self-reflecting. Hey, what's really going on here before I react to these other people or circumstances in my life?
Yeah, I mean that space is hard to get. It's hard to build. But I want to pause for a second because let's go back to kind of the start of maybe your career or wherever it seems like a good starting point in your life to pick up and kind of introduce who you are really as a person and why you are passionate about these things and how you've kind of created this not just a career but like a vocation for your life.
Um, Maybe a good way to answer that is like I grew up in Northeast Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. Beaver County, Pennsylvania, specifically, is like a famous area for athletics,
Mm.
specifically football. Like my dad played youth sports against Joe Namath. I played high school football against Ty Law, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame. My dad's dad was friends with Mike Ditka's dad. Tony Dorsett's cousins live across the street. These are older school people, but there's a ton of famous people. The Tom Cruise's early movie, All the Right Moves, is
Mhm.
about Aliquippa.
Mhm.
And there was uh, Friday Night Tykes was this like documentary on youth football, and they did a couple years in Texas. And they said in Texas, football is religion. Then they did a couple years in Beaver County, and they said in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, football is much more than what did they say? In Texas, football is religion. In Beaver County, Pennsylvania, it's much more than that. It's life. And then they go into their rundown steel mill towns. Your only way out is like get a college football scholarship. So I grew up in like blue collar areas, and I love sports. And my dad got me a jump rope, ankle weights, a Walkman, and Force Recon and Army Ranger Jody cassette tapes in sixth grade. So I'm push ups, sit ups, jump rope, running around the neighborhood. In seventh grade, my dad got me a weight set and asked the high school football team if I could train with them, Lake Blue Streak. So I'm in seventh grade, ride my BMX bike up to the high school, monkey rolls, stadium steps, the bigger, faster, stronger for older people out there. It's a
Mm.
bench squat, deadlift, or power clean program. And then I got a weight set at home. And then I started taking supplements early. My dad took me to people. He did a lot of things. Like, you want to get better at pitching? Here's a guy in town that pitched in the major leagues World Series. Like, I'm going to have him mentor you in pitching. You're going to train with the high school football team. Like, whatever he could provide for me to get better at football, like I soaked it up and I loved it. And I knew I wanted to play college football. In high school, I started meditating and journaling. Like, nobody taught me, but there was a Soldier of Fortune magazine had Paladin Press, and that's when we were kids. Me and my buddies learned how to make pipe bombs and smoke bombs from these books. But they also had Secrets of the Ninja Mind, and it had these stare at a candle and do breath work. And I forget when Pavel Satsulin started putting things out, but he was doing breath work things, not just kettlebell things.
Wow.
So very early on, even in high school, it was like, what can I do to get better at football, nutrition, meditation, journaling? I was drawn to spending a lot of time in nature because of hunting with my father. And back then, I didn't connect that with my spirituality. I wish the organized religion did more to teach us about the contemplative and mystical traditions, because I
Mhm.
was drawn to nature and silence. And so I did all these things to be better at football. And then in college, there's deeper stories. High school and college, I had severe football injuries, but the work habit that I had from grinding so hard and lifting, strict with my nutrition, spending the quiet time in nature, journaling, meditating, those things helped me rehab and come back from a lot of injuries where they said, you'll never squat again, you'll never run again. And I also had a very deep conversion, a deeper spiritual conversion in college after I ripped my calf in half and they said I'd never run again. I was like, oh man, I won't be able to go back in the military or join the FBI or try to play in the NFL. All my dreams I thought were going to be gone. And it's a much longer story, but I realized, for me at least, going to church every Sunday, saying your prayers, God, thank you for this. God, please give me that. Let me do. It was a lot of selfishness and very like first grade religiosity or churchianity to try to do the right thing and also get to heaven. So I had a deep conversion in college where I dove into the contemplative and mystical traditions. I got to come back, play another year of football. And so the point of this is when I eventually became a cop, and it's a longer story why I didn't go federal to why I chose to be a cop. I wanted to either end up a psychologist or a priest. And I learned through my first master's degree in forensic science. I lived on a mountain in West Virginia at a contract training facility, Storm Mountain Training Center, former DC SWAT, Green Beret. I was a forensic science grad student that was going through CQB, SWAT school, sniper school, rappelling, fast rope, with all these Green Berets and SWAT teams. I was like, dude, this is badass.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
by the way, the feds that came to these shooting courses like weren't into lifting and fighting and were not as high speed as enlisted special operations or just metropolitan SWAT teams. So I was like, man, it's not what I thought in the movie. So I ended up becoming a local cop. I decided to be a cop as a form of ministry. I can learn about spirituality, theology, psychology, and what a great place to do ministry. Everybody's hurting, the victim and the criminal, you know? And so I thought it was like a spiritual journey, but also I can try to be on a SWAT team and apply everything I did and enjoyed about sports to being a cop. Eat strict, work out, meditate, journal, seeking out spiritual mentors. I ended up being a strength coach at Yale and Georgetown under some big name coaches, Steve Pliss, Russ DeRosa, Augie Morelli. Like if you go back 25, 30 years, these were big names in the industry. And at the same time, I'm meeting with priests that are also psychologists, Dominicans and Jesuits and Benedictines, and diving into that in addition to yoga and Zen and training in MMA and mixed martial arts with Vinny Giordano in New York City, Roger Denton in Connecticut. Vinny introduced me to Tony Blauer, the Spear System, well known with first responders and vets. So
Here,
I can,
or like generally speaking, like what decade is all this happening? Because a lot of what
90s.
you're saying, you said 90s, is that what you said?
Yeah.
This is all pretty like contemporary stuff. Like, I mean, this is like leading edge for right now. People are kind of understanding that like this mind, body, spirit connection, you know, and creating this full spectrum warrior and just person in general. But that's pretty ahead of your time, I would think. I mean, I was a baby, but you know,
Yeah.
were people looking at you like you're a weirdo in the 90s for doing this, or were the results kind of speaking for themselves and it was, you know,
I think if you were to talk to the people that know me, and my girlfriend did a beautiful thing for my 50th birthday and reached out to a bunch of friends and mentors from different areas of my life and had them write a letter to me, and she put it in a book. And it's very consistent throughout my life that I've had people step up either to mentor me or had beautiful friends because I was kind of like the badass guy, but was also like emotional and sentimental and pushing really hard to better myself. But how do I love on and help other people around me as well? And so all those lessons from sports translated into law enforcement. And I'm sure that's why guys like Vinny Giordano, Rod Ryan at Storm Mountain Training Center would let me run and gun with SF guys is because he saw something in me, you know, and trusted me. Which is funny because then you go to my first police academy and you have all these egos and they're still shooting Weaver. I'm shooting modified isosceles. You see the defensive tactics programs and police work are really garbage, old school karate. And I was already training in jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and Tony Blauer spear. And they're saying that's bullshit. And I'm like, wait, no. And like, where did you learn how to shoot like that? And I want to be like from guys that have killed people for a living. I kind of trust these tier one special operators. So,
right.
which this translates into later when I become a police academy instructor, 2006 to 2009, I implement Division I strength conditioning, ground and pound dummies, uppercut bags, Muay Thai bags, heart rate monitors during fitness, fighting, shooting, breath work with an early HRV device, the stress eraser, imagery, progressive muscle relaxation. I was integrating this into the strength and conditioning and the tactical training, which I don't even know police academies doing that now. I'm still like banging the drum and fighting like, are you going to teach about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system? Are you going to teach about heart rate variability? Are you going to use some objective data to show people that they're stressed out and they're not going to make good decisions or perform their motor skills in a proficient manner when they're this stressed out? So what do we need to do? And everybody criticizes the police that they're brutal and they're racist. It's like, no, they're spazzing out because they don't have enough training. Look at that. An athlete in high school gets more motor skill development in a week of catching and throwing a ball than a cop will get in a whole year of driving, fighting, or shooting. And the shooting is hit a big piece of paper while you're breathing, closing an eye, and squeezing the trigger with no stress in broad daylight. But then you're in a foot pursuit or a car chase, you crash, you get out in the dark with somebody pointing a gun you're shooting on the move at a moving target and you've never scrimmaged like that in practice, but then you're a racist because you're a white cop and it was a black man, and nobody goes over motor skill development, complex decision making under stress, and look at the training records to see that most cops can barely punch holes in a paper target with no stress. Most cops cannot pull off any like martial arts skills, even if you have a compliant subject, let alone for every tool on your belt. I have a radio, I have handcuffs, I have an asp, I have a taser. Those add layers of complexity to decision making under stress that you need to hone each of these motor skills individually to have unconscious competence with
Yep.
the handcuffs, with the radio, with the different martial arts skills, with the driving. And then you have to integrate them as an athlete would while they're practicing and scrimmaging long before the game. But we don't do that. And then we say that this person's a murderer or a racist when it's really they were.
There's an added layer as well of kind of in the back of your mind, knowing that every decision that you make is going to be Monday morning quarterbacked, right after. So it's like, do you hesitate? Do you follow your instincts? Do you do, which, because you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of training. And like,
Mm-hmm.
as you just mentioned, the training isn't there, so sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to
No.
the other component of it is that, knowing that, like, man, every choice that I make right now is going to be scrutinized and psychoanalyzed by people who weren't there.
Yeah. We have expectations of perfection for cops to act like a tier one gunslinger, a UFC cage fighter or ninja, a lawyer, a psychologist, a social worker, and a paramedic
Right.
without any of the training of all these other professions. And if you look at the numbers, hey, look it up. How many people get killed or permanently disabled? And I'm one of them from a medical error. I have permanent disabilities from a surgery I never should have had. Look it up. Look up the numbers every year. Doctors and nurses are doing their best with far more education and training than cops, and things happen. They do their best, and people die or get disabled, and we don't make them wear body cameras. We don't let people film the operating room and scream and yell at them while they're doing brain surgery on a car accident victim.
Right.
And we don't scrutinize them if somebody complains or a family complains that somebody died. So we take you away from all the other doctors and nurses. We put you in a dark room or make you sit at home for 2 years and call you a racist or a murderer in the media. You and your family are getting death threats. We offer out of sight, out of mind. You're gag ordered. Your coworkers aren't allowed to call you after somebody complains on you. So imagine if every doctor and nurse, when somebody got hurt or a surgery or a procedure didn't work out, what if we threatened all of them with getting fired or going to prison, and we made them sit at home or sit in a dark room by themselves for 1 or 2 years where they're not allowed to talk to their coworkers? Do you think doctors and nurses would be real competent, or they'd be walking on eggshells like cops? Like, oh, we already have paralysis by analysis because we're not trained enough, right? So that happens. And now, am I the next guy that's going to be in the media that Black Lives Matter wants to burn my house down? And then some rogue district attorney that's funded by George Soros is going to charge me with murder or manslaughter, and I'm going to go to prison. I've had a number of cops, and I just wrote a letter to a judge recently for a police officer's case. They asked me to do it. Usually, when I support people, I'm on the sidelines in the shadows. I've dealt with many people in these big, horrible, when I say horrible, nobody knows what the cop and their family's going through when they get charged with a crime, or not even charged, but they don't know if for 2 years they're going to get charged with a crime or fired. And I wrote this judge and I talked about this, including the medical profession. And I said, I have had numerous cops across the country say, if I have a black man with a gun, I'd rather be shot and killed because my family would get the benefits and I'd be considered a hero. But if I use my firearm, I may get fired, I may go to jail, and my family won't get the benefits. And we'll lose the house and get a divorce, which happens a lot of the times when people are under investigation.
And the
That's how bad it is.
fact that is, like, honestly, like, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that. And sounds incredibly rational. Like that is not an irrational position to have. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, like I'm not saying it's the right necessarily position, but like I could absolutely see how somebody could go through that thought process and be like, yeah, I mean, on paper, that's the move. That is a better move than, roll the dice with the alternative. Wow.
Well, then let's go back, use sports as an analogy because most people understand sports. What if the only training you got in soccer 5 years ago, I put you 3 feet in front of the goal and
Hmm.
you just got to kick the ball in the goal?
No goalie.
And maybe, and no goalie. And maybe you do it 20, 50 times. 5 years later, then I make you sprint up and down the field, and you have defenders, and you have a goalie, and you have a crowd screaming at you, and you have referees or umpires. I'm not a soccer guy, so I don't know if there are referees or umpires in soccer. And what if, oh my God, so now I'm exhausted because I never had to run sprints before I kicked the ball. I've never had a defender on me plus a goalie. Oh my gosh, the fans are a huge distraction. And what if I make a mistake and the referee or umpire, referee, I think it is, calls a penalty, and the penalty isn't just the other side gets the ball. Hey, I may get kicked off the team, or you might be going to prison. And what if the referee makes calls sometimes because the fans are booing? So there's pressure from the fans, politics. So the referee calls a penalty because of the pressure. And what if my coach doesn't defend me? Sanctuary trauma. Agencies often don't back their cops, or even firefighters that make mistakes, but it's not as a problem
Controversial.
as cops.
Right, right.
But oh my God, the only practice you gave me was kicking a ball in an empty net 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Now, now I had all these other variables. I don't do it perfectly. The fans boo. The referee makes a call, and my coach ignores me, even though he didn't prepare me, and I might be going to jail. If that was the position for every professional athlete, like
Yeah.
how well would they be performing?
Yeah. And no wonder it would be you'd have a hard time recruiting soccer players.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So back to your story. Where were we at now? We're about okay, as a police instructor, a police academy instructor, right? And you're bringing all these different
Yeah.
modalities into the training. So pick it up from there.
Well, I ended up an instructor because I got hurt during SWAT, got the surgery that jacked me up, and then I was over medicated without understanding it because it was before we knew that opiates, benzos, muscle relaxers were really bad for you. I was on antibiotics for 3 years on and off, which killed my good gut bacteria
Oof.
and immune system. But back then, doctors were saying it wasn't that. I was sick, I was fat. I was usually 220 to 230. That's what I've been since 17. That's what I am now,
Yeah,
you
for
know?
people listening, I was going to say earlier, like Matt's built like a brick shit house. Like, yeah, so anyway, for people can't see you, but I recommend looking him up. This he looks like an absolute unit. Um, so okay, so you're overweight, and clearly something is not in alignment because your your physiology has fluctuated to this point, which kind of showing something's out of whack, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I was supposed to be at home on bed rest or light duty or whatever, like out on injury. And I didn't want to do that. So I stayed in the fight by going to somebody. Well, first we had two officers killed. So I got pulled full time to dealing with two officers murdered at a police station, which is a super tragedy. But I was already doing the peer support and mental health, but it gave me like really like gritty experience to have two cops murdered at their station, and the agency wasn't that prepared to handle that. So to help hire contract and the full-time psychologists do all the rebuilding and debriefing while I'm going through my medical issues. But it gave me something to focus on, to have meaning and purpose while I'm getting fat and wearing diapers and they can't figure out what's up with my medical. And then after I did that, they called me to the academy, and then I ended up rebuilding the strength conditioning and the wellness and all of those things with the breath work and heart rate variability, polar heart rate. We did research, a lot of stuff. I get medically retired, and I was on a ton of drugs. um, and fat and wearing diapers. And my psychiatrist in the DC area was very holistic. She had a nutritionist long before people were talking about this is over 16 years ago. Nutrition has a ties to mental health. She had yoga, she had meditation, she had tissue work. So she was an amazing woman and a great advocate for me, Dr. Colleen Blanchfield. If you're in the DC area and you want an amazing psychiatrist, she was ahead of her time. But she called me in after I got medically retired and told me to move to LA for functional and integrative medicine because she said everything that she was doing was normal in LA and I needed more resources like that. So that's why I moved to Manhattan Beach. Um, and I grinded away at physical therapy 3 days a week, vitamin IV every week, neurofeedback and psychoanalysis 2 to 3 days a week back then. And it took, it was a grind. And here's the thing that I share with people. I already was meditating, journaling, had a spiritual director that were priests, that were psychologists. As soon as I started going through problems, I asked work comp, I need a therapist, and they fought me on it, right? And I didn't have a stigma to it. So to get that psychiatrist, I had to jump through hoops. I'm doing I know how to eat, I know how to work out, and I know how to seek help, and it's still hard. I don't want people to wait until you're fat and out of shape or an addict or in the middle of your medical retirement or your divorce and be like, hey, try to learn how to eat healthy or meditate or do yoga or journal or share your feelings with a professional while you're in this dark place. It's like, wait till you're 400 pounds, you have a heart attack, and you're diagnosed with diabetes and say, hey, maybe you should eat clean and work out. I could give you a personal trainer. We could give you meal prep sent to your house. It's going to be so hard to change that. Or what if I wait until you have a mouthful of black cavities and I send you to a dentist that doesn't use anesthesia and has to yank all your teeth? Like, how about teaching people how to brush and floss? These food and drinks might cause cavities, so maybe avoid these foods, eat more of these, get a checkup every year. We catch a cavity early, we can do some work on it and not have to yank the tooth. So I'm this health nut guy that's grinding intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, physically. But dude, when I hit my adversity, my shit sandwich, life is still hard. There are no shortcuts. It's still a grind and it sucks. So I want people to have awareness and be trying to do things to help themselves before the crisis hits, before the bomb blows up in your life. Like, what if the military got rid of EOD units? What if we only train for after somebody steps on an IED or drives over it? We don't, no situational awareness. Everything's right of bang instead of left of bang. Hey, we know this stuff happens in sports. We prepare for it. We know that there's IEDs over here. So we're going to send out the EOD unit. We're going to do our best to avoid this stuff and be trained how to respond after. But in first responders and even mental health for veterans, I think we're still more right of bang versus left of bang. So my journey is I was a left of bang guy my whole life, but it's still hard when things happen.
Right.
You know? So LA, I get a second master's in sports psychology, planning on a PhD in clinical psych because I want to help athletes, veterans, first responders. I've known all along mental health, self-care is stigmatized. As a former athlete, coach, tactical guy, hopefully I can at least get a foot in the door and maybe help people when they're ready. And there's also a performance aspect to it, so self-regulation, performance enhancement, optimizing performance before the wheels come off, before we blow an engine or a transmission. We're taking pit stops. You got to take your foot off the gas, roll into a garage or a driveway, let the engine cool down, change the fluids, rotate the tires, check the brakes, run a diagnostic, and address things like, why aren't we doing operational maintenance on our minds and our hearts and our bodies? It's not just all CrossFit and jiu-jitsu till the wheels come off. So let's do maintenance. Let's do self-care. So I finished the sports psych degree. I'm doing coaching and sports psych out here, or was in LA. And I get a call from work comp that says your doctors cost too much and they're quacks. And you need to go back on medicines to save your department money. So wait, and I'm too fit and productive. And they had pictures of me with NFL guys looking like you've seen me look like, and they're criticizing me. versus be on opiates, benzos, muscle relaxers, psych meds, sleep meds versus physical therapy, psychotherapy, neurofeedback, IVs, vitamin IVs, supplements, and hormone replacement therapy.
Now, I'm a conspiratorial guy, so when I don't know, but let me ask you before I kind of input my 2 cents. Where do you think that pressure is coming from? Is it coming from ignorance, or is it coming from like malfeasance? Like this idea of,
It's malfeasance.
yeah, wow.
And court, we went all the way to the state Supreme Court. They cut off my pension, my disability pay, and my medical care for 3.5 years, which is why I didn't get a PhD. They dragged me through the mud, and it was justifying my functional and integrative care. And there's a Colgate football player that does documentaries, and Colgate's where I graduated from. I did 2 years at Air Force Academy, then Colgate. He was researching it. The money fell through, but he found out that work comp companies make a percentage of the money they save on you. So if my integrative care was $100,000 a year and they cut it off to take $100 of drugs a year, well, the work comp company makes money off the money they save. Also, there's a kickback, or there was, from the pharmaceutical companies.
Always.
Yeah. So, and I can tell you this, people don't, if you get hurt as a cop or a firefighter, it's ignored, delay, deny in most agencies. They try to get out of help. It's all about saving money. You could be a hero cop. And there's another story from my old agency going on right now that, a guy was like an amazing patrol cop, got all these awards, amazing detective, combat vet, ends up getting in a fight with a suspect that caused a bunch of serious injuries. And he's getting medically retired and struggling to get the medical care he needs. And also he did child sex crimes. And he's like, dude, I got PTSD from doing, like, you have to watch videos of children, like what happens, right? They have to write reports. And he's asking for mental health help. And they're like, nah, you're in limbo. And I've done peer support and chaplaincy for different nonprofits and through networking. That's not a one-off story. It's a common story. Is people have legit PTSD or medical problem from an on-the-job injury or exposure to trauma, and it's all about saving money. But if we did the proactive mental health and wellness, we taught about post-traumatic growth. If we had red light, cold plunge, sauna, meditation at stations, we would have higher performance and service to the community, better morale, better mental health. People would stay in the careers longer. They wouldn't lateral or retire early. You would be saving money.
Yeah, I'd be saving money.
So
All in the preventative care in the first place, because it's like we know with most like emergency medicine, if you get somebody, insulin is really cheap, but if you wait until they're having, a diabetic like DKA, and now you got to go amputate their leg in the emergency room, and then the insurance company or the hospital is like, well, let's just amputate below the knee because it costs a little bit more to get them up there. You know what I mean? It's like you guys are penny pinching on the wrong side of the equation, if that really is about saving money.
Yeah. So the system's broke. It's not,
Yeah.
and that came up in court, even though I was cut off for 3.5 years, no pay. I sold my old Jeep, my old third gen 4Runner that I love to pay bills, emptied my savings, and people had to go fund me while I'm fighting for my medical care. But the universe or God works things out if they will. No PhD, which would allow me to be a psychologist, to make money to support my pension, which I would have loved to do. But I ended up getting a third master's in pastoral theology, which allowed me to go deeper in my spiritual journey and allowed me to meet the next mentor I needed for this very another dark season. But Father Jim Clark is an expert in masculine spirituality and psychology, the contemplative tradition, spiritual direction. And I met him while I was in this third master's that I was just doing for myself. So there's things that happen that benefit me, even though I went through this misery. And then it changes the trajectory to where I'm a volunteer nonprofit one-man show, like chaplain, fitness, wellness, self-regulation, self-care type thing for first responders and veterans, which is, I know it's a much needed area. We need more people doing this. We need more retreats before people have PTSD, addiction, suicide. We need more outdoor activities, more shooting and jujitsu, and then sharing your story without alcohol and chasing women, like normalizing healthy things, or do some jujitsu and then do artwork, do some tactical shooting, do some breath work or yoga, like do a hard workout and then do some journaling. Do what you're doing with Guy this Sunday: sound bath, meditation, yoga, and an opportunity with people that are on a different path at this point. I want to heal. I want to grow. I want to be more present. I want to be more loving, first and foremost, to myself, and forgive myself for anything that I've had insecurity or baggage about. And let me just be honest about it. And then I want to show up more for my family, my spouse, my friends, in a much more meaningful and deeper manner for the rest of my life. And guess what? I can still be a badass firefighter, cop, businessman, and also emotional and loving. I can do both, but for whatever reasons, we're often locked into thinking to be the best, I gotta be so identified with this one area of my life.
Totally. I talk about this sometimes, or it's been brought up before, but balance in our Western American society, especially if you want to be a high achiever, um, in business or in anything, it's sort of like the culture is you need to have a single-minded approach. You look at a Steve Jobs or a Lance Armstrong or a Michael Jordan or any of these, people that we look up to, we put up on a pedestal as and without a doubt, those are the greats. But I think what people kind of fail to recognize is that you can't be the best in business if your family life is falling apart, or your health. You're like, hey, I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, and
Mm-hmm.
that just means I'm gonna order in crappy food and eat super late at night, or whatever the case is, and now your health is taking its toll. You're not getting as good of sleep, and now you're making more mistakes on the job. I think people fail to like appreciate a holistic approach to your life and wellness, and maybe it's balance. I like to use the word balance, but I know that some people don't. But I think it makes you better in the pursuit that you want to. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I could go down the theology and the spirituality of that and different orientations of psychology, but even scientifically and very objectively, we could prove this, at least with the military, police, and fire.
Hmm.
Let's give everybody an aura ring, right? Let's measure your HRV, and I want to do blood labs on you with your hormones, your neurotransmitters, your gut microbiome, your blood sugar, and inflammation markers before you go to boot camp, police, or fire academy. I want to do an EEG and measure your brain waves. And then throughout your career, we're going to have an aura ring on you. And every year we're going to do EEG and we're going to do blood labs, and we can track that stuff. And so guess what? Even if you're the SWAT guy that does CrossFit and jujitsu and paleo, and you're like high-fiving and rah-rah and get your shirt off on your Instagram, but what if I look at your HRV and it's dog shit, right? And especially if you realize, oh, I drink some beer before bed, that really messes up my deep and REM sleep. Or I have 6 cups of coffee up. I'm not operating at my best. And we should be covering the science of sleep and the parasympathetic nervous system, and the fact that you cannot outgrind and caffeinate and tobacco and gritty hardiness and still perform at the highest. Your reaction time is suffering if your HRV looks bad, if your nervous system's burned out, if you're not sleeping. Your motor skills, your decision making, and your decision making, your motor skills are not optimal at all.
Now, what are some, and you kind of ran through some like blood markers, but like just for, the average person, but maybe somebody that, is conscientious of these things, they are trying to, operate or live at an optimal, level, what are some markers that would be a good thing for most people just to kind of like be aware of, generally speaking, and not just wait until their 50-year-old colonoscopy, like what I'm 34. How old am I? 34. What should I be focusing on, or not necessarily focusing on, but getting tested to at least be aware of?
Man, while you're still feeling good, testosterone, estrogen, ultra sensitive estrogen for men, thyroid, at least TSH, IGF-1, indicator of your growth hormone, blood sugar, A1C, glucose, and insulin, inflammation markers like homocysteine, CRP. I would seek or read up on functional and integrative doctors, functional and integrative medicine. If you can afford one, find one in your area. And now they have uh, gut microbiome tests. I would do that. There's also, you can use your ancestry.com or your 23andMe, and there's all these like 30. I think that Gary Brecka dude does like 5, but I mean, yeah, like you can actually just even my ancestry.com,
Yeah.
my integrative doctor had like 40 different things that he broke down just from my ancestry.com saliva test.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's functional and integrative medicine is what I would look up, but I would look at inflammation markers, blood sugar markers, and hormones. And obviously, I'm more familiar with men's stuff than women's. And I would want to see that when I'm doing good,
Hmm.
like early in my career.
Right, right.
Because here's another issue with cops across the country and firefighters is people are hopping on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, in their late 20s.
Yep.
Wow, something's wrong if in your late 20s you need testosterone. And they're going to men's clinics that will give them 200, 300 milligrams. Like even if you're a 180-pound guy and you're starting at 200 or 300 milligrams, like, whoa. But that they know that you might see results right away, but it's like, how's your nutrition been? How's your sleep been? Have you been managing your stress? How are your workouts, your exercise? Are you getting morning sunlight? Like, how are the relationships in your life? And when people talk to me, it's like, I haven't worked out in 5 years. Oh, I've been eating like shit. My marriage is so stressful. I hate my boss at work. It's like, dude, TRT is not the answer
Yeah.
right now. You need, I suggest you work on your nutrition, your sleep, your fitness, your relationship, and your self regulation and stress management, because all of those things affect your hormones. And you want to maximize your health to the best of your ability and not just put a band aid on something and not address the root issues. Because if you start TRT now, then you're lowering your natural levels. Sometimes your estrogen or red blood cells, or people have problems or complications, and then you get off, and then you might have hurt yourself and have been at a lower level. It's just like if you haven't maximized your fitness levels naturally, there's no reason to do steroids, right?
Yeah.
But people want the magic bullet, the magic shortcut, the quick fix, the spiritual bypassing. Like, if you've done no work on yourself, unless you're suicidal, I don't suggest hopping on the veteran retreats to go south of the border and doing psychedelics. If you're in a terrible marriage and all your friends are drinkers and cheating on their wives, and you go peek behind the curtain and get some self forgiveness or meet God with ayahuasca or bufo or ibogaine, and then you come back to a very toxic and dysfunctional marriage, you don't have a therapist, all your friends are still booze hounds, like, then you're looking forward to the next retreat to trip your balls.
That's the next
Like,
escape, you know.
it's the next self-medicating. Like, so
Right.
I would tell, even for, because psychedelics, I wish people in the police world and the fire world need to talk about it, because cops and firefighters are hearing all the SEALs and the Green Berets on podcasts, and they're talking to me. They're already doing it. And I can't get people to talk about ketamine assisted therapy. That's legal. You could keep your job. You wouldn't be in trouble. But
Right.
then if they do it, people are just getting an IV and they're not in therapy. And there are scientific benefits to it. But what comes up, that's important stuff that you should be in therapy. So, like, my advice is, can you get in weekly therapy for 6 months? Can you start eating better and start either a meditation or a yoga or a journaling practice or one or more of those? Start having boundaries in your unhealthy relationships. These friendships are no longer serving me well. I love you, I thank you, but like I'm headed in a different direction. Here's my new values, mission, and goals. Find a community that supports your growth, or you need to be isolated a lot of the times. Get comfortable being isolated with mentors, elders, a therapist, or a community of support. And it might be a support group of some, are you struggling with porn or alcohol or whatever your addictions are? And then can you go on a veteran, first responder, meditation, yoga, silent, or a faith-based retreat if that's your thing? And can you share your feelings while you're sober with other people? Because that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. Now, if you do that 6 months or a year of being in therapy, I have been on 1 or 2 retreats, I now journal or I meditate or I do yoga or I'm doing artwork or I'm learning how to play a musical instrument. I'm doing something to calm my nervous system and self-reflect and recharge my battery and start seeking to redefine my mission and goals. Then maybe I'll go on a psychedelic retreat. But then I caution people, because it's hard to find a good therapist. It's hard to find a good chaplain. A lot of people in the psychedelic space I've met are really broken people that want to be the guru.
100%. And so when you talk to, how receptive have your community been to this message, just in general? I mean, it sounds like I'm trying to figure out at what point in the hierarchy at, let's say the police level, um, are you starting to lose people? I would imagine, my gut is telling me that your average enlisted dude, like, your beat cop, that's they're kind of on board with this because they're maybe suffering, even though, I don't know, maybe I'm kind of putting my own layer on top of it. But so are people pretty receptive to it? And at what point are you starting to lose people to where they're like, nah, that's just too expensive, not here, you know?
This is where maybe this is some of my strength and my weakness. My strength and love is working in small group and individually, because everybody's story is different. Everybody's preferences are different. And that goes back to, it's not going to be stellate ganglion block for everyone, ketamine for everyone, EMDR for everyone, transcendental meditation versus this meditation versus keto, carnivore, paleo, vegan. Everybody's story matters, and everybody's healing or growth prescription or formula is going to look different, even spiritually and religiously. And I personally want to be sensitive to everybody's unique individual journey. So a lot of the deeper things that I may be talking to you about, like openly, are not things that I go stand and just blast,
Huh.
because I want everybody to be comfortable and share their story with me. And if they ask, I may share a little bit of some of this stuff that we may have fire hosed in this last hour or so. But I think individually, there's a lot of people that are very receptive, like we shared earlier, because they don't want to hear from the 80-year-old pastor that's out of shape or the 50-year-old MFT that shares her story that she had a terrible marriage and a terrible childhood. And then whether she went to therapy or did psychedelics or got EMDR herself 4 years ago, and then went and did an online MFT, and now she's a therapist and wants to heal cops or veterans. But you're like some out of shape 50-year-old woman that doesn't understand me pursuing excellence, and that I've been on a SWAT team, or I've been on a special operations unit, or I've been a smoke jumper, firefighter, hotshot. What, you don't understand the fact that I played Division I sports and went to a top tier law school. Like, you don't get me. So, and those people are the ones that I know, because guys are honest with me when we go to a peer support conference or they see somebody online that they share their broken story. And there's still a bit of a victim mindset with some first responders and veterans. This happened to me, and oh my God, and I ruined my marriage and I got medically retired. And it's okay not to be okay. So seek help before you ruin your life like mine. And by the way, buy my book, pay me to be a speaker, or pay me to be your life coach. And the high functioning guys and gals are like, that doesn't resonate with me. This guy's, you know, but there's somebody out there that is in the middle of the bottle on a divorce, and that story may hit them. But high functioning alpha types, men and women, don't want to burden others.
Yeah, right.
They don't want to burden others, and they want to be seen, heard, understood, not judged. And they don't want somebody that tries to fix them or pull the guru thing.
Yeah, right.
But then there's the other people that are hurting so bad, they'll listen to the guru. Let me do EMDR and I'll cure you. I'll do it. Let me do this retreat and we'll do these drugs and you'll be cured. Or you can do this SGB shot and you'll be cured. I believe in all these things, and I've been doing MERT. And if I haven't told you about MERT,
no,
it's out of Encinitas, Wave Neuroscience.
no.
Dude, it helped my sleep more than anything.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. We need to talk about that because they do an EEG. Dr. Eric Wan is like the lead guy for Wave Neuroscience.
Yeah.
I stumbled upon this, and here it is. Here's other tools out there to try, non-pharmaceutical. They do an EEG. They measure your brain waves, which I'm familiar with because I've been doing neurofeedback for 16 years. I meditate, measure my brain waves, and they want to improve your alpha.
Yeah.
And TMS, transmagnetic cranial, whatever, I guess is like one size fits all. So they use the same equipment and they use the EEG to do the voltage or whatever specific to your brain waves.
Interesting.
And in 4 weeks, hey, I've done stellate ganglion block, 5 of them, even with Botox.
Wow.
I have done ketamine.
Yep.
I've done a lot of things.
Yep.
In 4 weeks, that was like,
wow.
I cut my sleep medication in half.
No shit.
Like, boom. Yeah. And if you have TRICARE, if you have TRICARE, it's covered.
No way.
Pretty sure.
That's
yes.
Incredible. Yeah, offline, I'm gonna follow up about that because that's probably the biggest area. I mean, like I sleep, I manage, like I don't wake up super tired or anything like that, and but I just know I'm always awake in my sleep, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm kind of like a hypervigilant sleeper. And I'm just sort of, but I also recognize, there's that guy, Brian Johnson. He's like the guy who's trying to live forever tech dude. He's kind of a weirdo. But he's like doing his like biometric age on like every single like system in his body. And you should look this guy up. But anyway, long story short, his one piece of advice to like just every person, that he's like, he views the way he kind of goes through his life now is it's all about trying to sleep. Like he's like his waking hours are just to set up the best level of sleep that he can get, because he's found that it's like the probably biggest thing that you can implement in your life or improve in your life to start seeing carry on effects throughout. And that goes to nutrition. It goes to other stuff, because if you're eating super late at night, or you're having, a lot of sugar or something, different aspects to it, but it's all going to jack up your sleep, and then that's going to jack up your cortisol and your heart rate variability and all the systems, So that's probably one of the areas where I'm like, and I don't want to take sleep medication. I want to figure out how to sleep better naturally. And I take like my mushroom supplements, and I do a lot of things that really do help me, but I'm definitely interested in, finding some more stuff just to kind of maybe improve that naturally. So let's see. We're kind of wrapping up here, but I would love to, what are some final notes that you want to leave people? I mean, we've touched on a lot, but is there any sort of like parting message you can leave with the audience?
Yeah, well, we've talked about it today. So I challenge, if you have the financial ability, and if you have a PPO insurance, almost every PPO and some HMOs have an annual preventative wellness lab, and they will cover the full gamut of blood work. So there's no reason that once a year, and do your own research, because it's hard unless you can get a functional integrative doctor. Look up the labs you want and take them to your primary care, find a primary care and be like, I want to get all my blood sugar. I want to get all my metabolic. I want to get inflammation markers, and I want to get my hormones tested. And go get that done. If you can afford an Oura ring, buy an Oura ring. Educate yourself on heart rate variability. Start paying attention to your deep and REM sleep. Look up sleep hygiene. Look at the ways to improve your sleep. And if you want to do another episode, we could like break some of this down, but look up sleep hygiene. Pay attention to your HRV at least once a month. At least once a month. So blood work,
Yeah.
HRV, schedule half a day or a full day where you're not going to be on your phone.
Yeah.
You're going to have a fast from technology. You're going to go to a park. You're going to go to the ocean. You're going to go on a hike. You're going to rent a canoe with your loved one or a best friend. You're going to do something in nature where it's silent. And if you can, on that one day a month, go get a massage or acupuncture after. If you live somewhere like we do in Southern California, go to a wellness center, do a cold plunge, a sauna, and or a sensory deprivation float tank. Do one day a month. That is your pit stop. That is your maintenance. That's your tune up. And I would hope that over time, you look at your HRV, you may be looking at your blood work and you just feel better. And especially if you're doing it with your spouse or a loved one or one of your children, if you have a child, like your relationship starts improving. Hey, maybe we need to do this twice a month. Maybe we need to do this once a week.
Love that. That's such a good message. Um, before I have you tell the audience where they can find you and connect with you, I'd love to send you a bag of coffee. Or are you more of a matcha guy? Like, do you drink coffee?
Oh yeah, yeah, brother. We're all into organic
Yes.
coffee. Yeah, yeah.
All right, cool. We'll send you a bag of our mushroom infused organic Mexican coffee.
Awesome.
But Matt, you want to just tell the people where to find you, how they can connect with you, if they have any other questions, maybe how they can reach out?
Yeah. My website is tacticalchaplain.com. Really easy. Tacticalchaplain.com. That'll have interviews, media I've been in, more of my personal story. I'm supposed to be building another website soon. Hopefully, that's going to be broader because some people think that chaplain pigeonholes me because I do much more than just spirituality. So I'm going to have a different website in the future, but I'll always have tacticalchaplain.com. On LinkedIn, Matt Domyancic, Domyancic. So I'm on LinkedIn. On Instagram, I post most on Thin Blue Line Spirituality, and I also have The Tactical Chaplain. Even though I'm not a social media guy, but I do try to post, and I don't post really anything about myself. I try to post up positive quotes like mind, body, spirit, psychology, self-care, functional and integrative medicine. So Thin Blue Line Spirituality and The Tactical Chaplain. I am on Facebook, but I never check it. I think my Instagram posts automatically go to Facebook. So please don't try to reach out on Facebook. Reach out on LinkedIn or through The Tactical Chaplain or Instagram. And happy to help anyone individually or any agencies or other nonprofits that would maybe want to do more retreats, more outdoor recreational stuff, like with Swell and the Jimmy Miller, like the surf therapy. We didn't talk about it, but I do something called Pujitsu peer support.
Cool.
There'll be jujitsu, tactical firearms, cold plunge, breath work. And then I do a 4-hour interactive mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health and wellness. This is what I've been doing going back to when I was at the police academy, where we need more for cops. All cops need more tactical firearms, more martial arts, but they got to understand the parasympathetic nervous system, HRV, as well as self-reflection, learning lessons from our hardship, post-traumatic growth, the hero's journey, the second half of life per Carl Jung. Very important concept. And people will do the shooting and the fighting, and then we'll get to the end and, arms crossed, unless you know me already. The people that have ridden with me or been friends with me know that, okay, Matt will say something useful and not be a dork. But guys that don't know me will be, they'll go from arms crossed to like leaning in and then be like, wow, I thought this was going to be the same old bullshit about PTSD, addiction, suicide from somebody that doesn't care and doesn't understand. Then they'll be like, how come we're not having more of these proactive conversations explaining it in a manner that's practical and applicable to all their lives, that we could implement these things throughout our career. and be a better cop, firefighter, or military operator, and a better father, husband, wife, mother, friend to the people we love, and a better part of society in our community with building bridges instead of more division.
God damn, Matt, you're so deep, such a deep dude. A breath of fresh air. This is exactly the impression that I had when I first met you. I was like, wow, dude, we need more of that and just that message. I mean, I didn't even have a podcast at the time when we met. I was just doing my business and trying to grow it that way. But this was what I was trying to communicate to the world is the message that you're putting out there. So thank you so much for what you're doing. I'd love to also support any of these like pujitsu events, anything that I could help show up for, give out free coffee, and just sort of just be there, because that's what makes me feel good in giving back to my community through my business, which is Wind and Sea Coffee. So thank you again, Matt.
Awesome, brother. And yeah, we need to get going because there's a community growing. So let's get this going in San Diego more, where we're gonna go lift weights and cold plunge and
Yep.
sound bath and do
Yep.
some archery or horseback ride or rent ATVs. And we're not gonna drink, and we're gonna have meaningful conversations about growing and healing.
Incredible, dude. I'm so on board. Yeah, 100%. Cool. All right, hold on, stick around.